I woke up to the sterile hum of hospital monitors and the sharp smell of antiseptic. My head throbbed like someone had driven a railroad spike through it, and my arms were covered in bruises and scrapes. The light above me was too bright, and for a moment I couldn't remember how I got here. Then, through the haze, I saw him. Brad. My husband of 8 years. He was sitting beside my bed, holding my hand in his, a strained smile on his face. "You're lucky to be alive," he said softly. But there was something about the way he said it, the look in his eyes. It didn't feel like relief, it felt like calculation. The doctors told me it was a car accident. I had apparently lost control, swerved off the road, and slammed into a tree. They said it was a miracle I survived, that if I hadn't been wearing my seatbelt or if the car had hit at a slightly different angle, I might not have made it. But something didn't add up. For one, I had been wearing my seatbelt. I remember clicking it in place before leaving work that evening. Yet when I asked the nurse where it had gone, she told me it was severed, as if someone had sliced through it. I tried to explain that to Brad later, but he brushed it off, said maybe it tore in the crash. "It happens," he told me, his voice just a little too rehearsed. As the hours passed, I kept replaying everything in my head. The road was dry, visibility clear, no animals darting out, nothing that should have caused me to lose control. The steering had felt stiff. The brakes? I wasn't sure, but I had a memory of pressing down and getting no resistance. A sharp curve, a tree, a flash of white light. The rest was blank. When the car was finally towed and I saw it in the lot, crushed on the passenger side, airbags deployed, it looked like the aftermath of a nightmare, but what truly sent a chill down my spine was the faint mark under the dashboard. A set of fresh tool scratches near the brake system. Not damage from the crash, too precise for that. That night in the hospital, Brad brought me soup and a stack of magazines. He sat with me like a loving husband would. He even rubbed my feet. And yet, every gesture felt performative, like a show he was putting on for the nurses or anyone else who might be watching. I tried to tell myself I was paranoid, that trauma was making me suspicious, but I'd never doubted Brad before. I'd trusted him with everything, my life, my finances, my future, and now I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. 2 days later, when I was discharged, he brought me home in a rental car and carefully guided me to the couch. He fluffed the pillows, made me tea, and kissed me on the forehead. But as he turned away, I caught a flicker of something in his expression. Not tenderness, not relief. Something colder, something like resentment, or maybe disappointment. That night, I lay awake while he snored beside me. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the brakes, the seatbelt, the fact that no one else had touched the car in days, but someone clearly had. And for the first time in 8 years of marriage, I allowed myself to consider the impossible. What if it wasn't an accident? What if Brad wanted me gone? The next morning, I made coffee with shaking hands. He asked if I was okay and kissed my cheek. I nodded. I smiled. I lied. Because deep down, something had broken loose. Not just my trust, but a survival instinct I didn't know I had. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. I needed to be sure. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. This wasn't just a car crash. It was the opening move in a game I hadn't agreed to play. And if Brad thought I'd go down quietly, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. 3 days after I got home from the hospital, a thick envelope arrived in the mail, addressed to me in neat block lettering. Brad tossed it on the kitchen counter like it was junk, but I recognized the logo in the corner. Marion Mutual Insurance. I hadn't heard of them before. That alone was strange. I opened it while Brad was in the shower. Inside were a set of policy documents and a welcome letter congratulating me on my newly issued life insurance plan. According to the letter, I was now insured for $200,000, 0 cents. The beneficiary was listed as my husband, Brad Mitchell. The policy had been activated 3 months ago, and the premiums were already fully paid for the year. My heart stopped. I sat down at the kitchen table and flipped through the pages again, thinking I'd misread something. I hadn't. There was my name, my birth date, my address, even my social security number, all accurate, all official. I tried to think back. Had Brad mentioned something about signing up for new insurance? A supplemental plan? Anything? No, not a word. And I definitely hadn't signed anything. I knew that for certain. I hadn't touched a pen for any financial paperwork in months. Everything was online, and even then he usually handled most of it. He was better with numbers, as he always liked to remind me. A coldness spread through me. I stared at the signature line on the application copy, scanned and printed in grayscale. My name was there, written in a close enough imitation of my cursive to fool someone who wasn't me. But it wasn't mine. I could tell instantly. It was slightly too rounded, the slant wrong, the pressure inconsistent. Brad had forged my signature, and he'd done it months before the accident. The first instinct was to panic, but I forced myself to think rationally. I needed more information. I called the insurance company, put on my most polite voice, and asked for verification. I told them I was reviewing my documents and just wanted to confirm the enrollment process. The rep on the line was cheerful and helpful. Yes, the policy was active. Yes, the beneficiary was correct. Yes, the premium had been paid in full via electronic funds transfer. It looks like we received your signed application back in January, the rep said. Did you want us to resend the full copy for your records? I swallowed hard. Yes, please. That would be great. After the call, I sat motionless, staring at the countertop. He hadn't just faked a signature. He'd planned this. Carefully, strategically. He'd insured my life for $200,000, 0 cents, and made himself the sole beneficiary. And then, a few months later, my brakes had mysteriously failed. Brad came out of the shower minutes later, towel slung over his shoulder, humming. He kissed the top of my head as he walked past. "Want eggs?" he asked, opening the fridge. I murmured a yes, keeping my expression neutral. My heart was pounding. I couldn't let him see anything yet. Later that day, I dug into our shared email account. Brad wasn't the smartest when it came to digital footprints. He'd always used the same password for everything, and I knew it. I found a series of emails from a private Gmail account I didn't recognize, someone named JM Auto Services. The subject lines were vague, but when I clicked through, my stomach turned. There were payment confirmations for custom part replacements, manual brake adjustments, and install requests, all dated the week before the accident. One invoice even listed our car's make and model, $2,700, 0 cents, paid via Zelle. I Googled the name. JM Auto wasn't a shop. It was a single guy operating out of a storage unit south of town. Unlicensed, untraceable. Perfect for someone looking to rig a car without a paper trail. I printed everything, the emails, the invoice, the forged insurance application. I made copies and stashed them at the bottom of a box in the garage beneath old Christmas decorations I knew Brad would never touch. Then I texted my friend Vanessa. She was a paralegal who worked in civil litigation and knew more about fraud than most lawyers I'd met. I didn't give her details, just said I needed to talk. Urgently. We met that night at a diner off the highway. I brought a folder full of papers. Vanessa flipped through the documents in silence, her expression hardened with each page. When she finished, she looked up at me. "This is bad," she said. "He forged your signature on a legally binding document, which is fraud. He paid a guy to tamper with your car. That's attempted murder if you can prove intent. This isn't just a messed up relationship, Emily. This is criminal." I nodded slowly. I'm not crazy. No. You're lucky to be alive. She tapped the life insurance policy with her nail. This is motive. And the car, if we can get forensic confirmation that the brakes were deliberately altered, it's over for him. I exhaled, finally, like I'd been holding my breath since the crash, but relief wasn't what I felt. It was rage. Pure, clean, focused rage. Vanessa leaned in. "What do you want to do?" "I want to bury him," I said. She nodded. "Then we start by documenting everything, and I mean everything. Don't confront him yet. You keep playing the dutiful wife. Let him think he's still in control." I drove home in silence, hands steady on the wheel. Brad greeted me with a kiss and a drink, said he was proud of how well I was recovering. He talked about maybe taking a vacation soon, just the two of us, someplace warm. I smiled and agreed. I even hugged him. But inside, everything had changed. He had put a price on my head, $200,000. I was never going to let him collect it. I was going to make sure he regretted ever thinking I was that easy to eliminate. I wasn't just alive, I was alert, and soon I was going to be dangerous. In the days that followed, I became a different version of myself. I still smiled, I still kissed Brad on the cheek when he left for work, I still cooked dinner, folded laundry, laughed at his jokes, But beneath it all, I was watching, I was gathering. Every word he said, every glance, every receipt he left in his jacket pocket, I memorized it all. I no longer lived with my husband, I lived with my target. Vanessa helped me outline a plan. Step 1, gather all documentation related to the insurance policy. I needed more than forged papers, I needed a trail. While Brad was gone one afternoon, I used his laptop. He rarely logged out of his accounts. In his email, I found a folder marked financial planning. Inside were spreadsheets detailing his debts, credit card balances, overdue loan statements, and a particularly damning Excel sheet labeled contingency plan. It was a breakdown of our assets, his projected financial recovery timeline, and, chillingly, a line item that read, M payout $200, 0 cents, K Marion Mutual. Right next to it, CC debt equals cleared, leftover $45, 0 cents, K. It was dated 2 weeks before the crash. I felt sick. He'd factored my death into his financial recovery plan. He'd actually sat down and done the math. He wasn't trying to kill me in a moment of desperation or rage. He did it calmly, rationally. I printed everything and saved copies to a hidden drive I tucked into a false bottom of my old makeup case. Vanessa told me to keep multiple redundancies, hard and digital. If anything ever happened to me, I wanted the truth to survive. Step 2, verify the car tampering. Vanessa connected me with a private vehicle forensics expert named Thomas Grant. He was retired, worked out of his garage in Tucson, and charged cash. Perfect. I told Brad I wanted to have the car towed for peace of mind. He shrugged, said he understood. I could see the flash of uncertainty in his eyes. He hadn't expected that. I told him the insurance company was requesting it, that it was standard. He didn't argue. Thomas worked fast. 2 days later, I met him in his garage. The car was up on a lift, panels open, parts exposed like a disassembled puzzle. He didn't say much, just pointed. The brake lines had been tampered with, intentionally cut, then resealed with a plastic compound designed to fail under pressure. Whoever did this knew what they were doing, Thomas said. This wasn't wear and tear. It wasn't an accident. It was sabotage. I felt my stomach twist, even though I'd already known it. Hearing it confirmed was something else. I asked him to document everything in a report. He handed me a flash drive and nodded. You're not the first wife I've helped, he said quietly, but I hope to God you're the last. I thanked him and left, driving home in a daze. My hands shook at stoplights. Every breath felt like a lie I had to keep repeating just to survive the next minute. I walked through the front door and there was Brad, cooking dinner, humming. He looked up and smiled. You okay? He asked. You look pale. I nodded and told him I was just tired. He poured me wine and made me sit down. I wanted to throw the glass in his face. I wanted to scream, but instead I sipped and thanked him and asked about his day. That night, I installed a recording app on my phone and left it running every time we spoke. I started asking him casual, offhand questions. Do you remember when we bought the car? You were so sweet to surprise me. Or, hey, when did you say we signed up for that life insurance policy? I must have forgotten. At first, he gave vague answers. A while back, I just wanted to protect you. I thought you'd like it. But then he got sloppy. He was arrogant. He thought I didn't suspect anything. And one evening, as we sat in the living room, he said it. I mean, we've both been under stress, right? He said, flipping through TV channels. The accident, it was awful. But at least if something had happened, I'd have been taken care of. I mean, I did all that prep work just in case. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just let the recorder on my phone do its job. I even smiled a little and touched his hand. I know, I whispered. You always take care of me. And he grinned like the smug, confident bastard he was. The next day, Vanessa and I sat at her dining table, laying everything out. Insurance records, financial spreadsheets, brake line photos, Thomas's report, email logs, payment trails, the audio file. It was enough to take to the police, but we weren't ready yet. He's still in control of your life right now, she said. He could sense it, catch on, disappear. Or worse. She was right. I needed to wait, and trap him in his own overconfidence. I needed him to make a move that would solidify everything. And then he gave it to me. Brad's behavior shifted. He started asking questions about my recovery. He wanted to know if I was driving again. He pushed me to get back to normal. He even suggested I take a road trip to clear my head. Go see your sister, he said one night, pouring wine like a doting spouse. You need a break. It was too much. Too obvious. I played along. I told him it was a great idea. I started planning the trip. He offered to check the car for me, just to be sure it was safe. I knew then he was going to try again. Vanessa and I changed course. We set up a hidden dash cam, a GPS tracker, and another audio recorder in the car. If he touched it, we'd know, and he did. 2 days before I was set to leave, the GPS tracker showed the car moved late at night, just briefly, around the block. I checked the camera footage. He'd popped the hood. Something was added to the engine. We didn't even need to see what. It was enough. We had him up. The next phase would require precision. I wasn't just going to expose Brad. I was going to destroy the illusion he'd built around himself. The perfect husband, the grieving man almost widowed in a tragic accident, the victim. That mask was going to crack and I was going to be the one to rip it off. But I needed to wait just a little longer. I needed to let him feel safe, let him think he was winning. Because the bigger the ego, the harder the fall. And Brad, he was going to crash harder than I ever did. I used to think love was built on trust, that two people could share a life and protect each other from the worst parts of the world. I believed in that for 8 years. I let Brad hold my hand through every hardship, believed his stories, his smiles, his little reassurances when something felt off. But now I saw it clearly. Every time he touched my back and said, "I've got you," he was already calculating the value of my life. Every time he paid for dinner or filled up the gas tank or said, "Don't worry, I've got the finances," he was investing in his future payout. He wasn't my protector. He was my predator. And I was just a number on his spreadsheet. The memories came in waves, each one now tainted. The day he surprised me with the car. My birthday 2 years ago, I'd come outside and there it was, a shiny black SUV with a bow on top. "Because you deserve it," he'd said, kissing my forehead. I cried, not because of the car, but because I thought I mattered that much to him. I remembered how he started insisting that I always drive alone when visiting my sister or going to work events. "You're more comfortable behind the wheel," he said. "Besides, I worry when you're on the road, so I just want you to feel safe." What he meant was, he wanted me isolated, in the vehicle he had control over, with no witnesses. And I had played right into it. I started revisiting other moments too, like the time he made me sign what he said was refinancing paperwork for our mortgage. He handed me the pages on a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, said the notary would come by later. I hadn't looked closely, I trusted him. What else had I signed that wasn't what it seemed? Vanessa helped me get copies from the county records office. Turns out that refinance was actually a title transfer of a small property I inherited from my aunt. He tried to use it as collateral for a loan. The only reason it didn't go through was because he backed out last minute, probably because the lender asked for a verification call from me, and he couldn't fake that. Even little things made my skin crawl now. The way he watched me open mail, the way he reminded me to take my vitamins every morning. Vitamins he personally prepped in a labeled bottle. I hadn't taken them since the hospital, just in case. But what had been in them before? It wasn't paranoia anymore, it was survival. I started keeping a daily journal, notes of every strange interaction, every suggestion he made, every moment where something felt orchestrated. Brad's behavior had shifted since I started pretending to move on. He was overly attentive now, overly cautious. It was clear he was waiting for me to drop my guard again. "You've been so strong through all this," he'd say, brushing my hair back. "You're like a different woman." If only he knew how right he was. But what terrified me more than anything was how he could maintain the act. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't erratic. He didn't show any signs of guilt. He played his role perfectly. Husband, caretaker, concerned partner, and that meant one thing. This wasn't his first time hiding something. He'd done this before. Maybe not murder, maybe not life insurance scams, but deception. That was second nature to him. One night, while he was in the shower, I unlocked his phone. He never changed the password. That's how confident he was. I dug into his hidden photo albums, his deleted texts, his app history. That's when I found the burner app, a hidden vault disguised as a calculator. Inside were screenshots of betting slips, confirmation emails from gambling sites, messages with someone labeled only as Mitch discussing loan repayments and due dates. In one thread, Brad wrote, "I'll have the payout soon, everything's in motion, just need her to take that trip." The date was 4 days before my accident. He was drowning in gambling debt, over $60,000, 0 cents from what I could piece together. He owed dangerous people who were calling in favors. The life insurance money wasn't just greed. It was survival. He had sold me to save himself. I snapped photos of everything. Vanessa and I organized them by timeline, built a full narrative: fraud, financial coercion, attempted murder. We were almost ready to go to the authorities, but I told her I needed more. I didn't want just a conviction. I wanted to annihilate the persona he wore so easily: the charming, supportive husband, the community volunteer, the guy who waved at the neighbors and brought cookies to work. I wanted everyone to see what I had seen, what I had lived with. So I started recording our conversations openly, with a small voice recorder in my pocket. I told him it was for therapy, so I could process our healing. He agreed without hesitation. Of course he did. He thought the more I leaned on him, the less I suspected. In one recording, I asked, "Did you ever think about what would happen if I died?" He paused, then said, "I don't want to think about that, but I guess, at least I'd know you were taken care of, that you had a plan in place. I mean, that's why I set up the policy in the first place, just in case. Just in case." That phrase stuck with me. Another time he said, "You should really take that trip to California, Em. Just get away for a bit. I can take care of everything here." He smiled when he said it, leaned in like it was romantic. But I heard the blade under the softness. He had chosen a number, $200,000. That's what my life was worth to him. A debt solution, a way out. He could have divorced me. He could have begged me for help. I'd have given him money if he had asked. I'd done it before. But he didn't want partnership. He wanted a payout, and he almost got it. That night, as I stood in front of the bathroom mirror brushing my teeth, I caught his reflection behind me. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "You've been through hell," he whispered, "but we're getting through it, together." I smiled at him in the mirror. He kissed my shoulder, and as I stared into his eyes, I thought, "You don't even realize you're already buried. You just haven't heard the dirt hit the coffin yet." The plan was almost ready. One final move and he'd step right into it. He thought he was the one steering this car, but I was the one holding the wheel now, and I wasn't just going to save myself. I was going to wreck everything he thought he'd built. Slowly, publicly, irreversibly, because I may have been worth $200,000, 0 cents to him, but I was about to become the reason his entire life collapsed. That was going to be my real payout. The day I decided to go on the trip, Brad's face lit up like a man who just won the lottery. He didn't ask too many questions, just nodded along when I told him I needed a change of scenery and some time to breathe. He even offered to help pack, though I declined. That same night, he made dinner, poured wine, and proposed that I drive out west. Just me, no flights, no schedule. "You've always loved the open road," he said, laying it on just thick enough to be suspicious. He was excited, almost giddy, and I knew exactly why. It was the second attempt. The first had failed because I hadn't died. He was trying again, and this time he was certain I'd cooperate, that I was softened, traumatized, and emotionally vulnerable. He had no idea how wrong he was. Vanessa and I had spent the past 2 weeks fine-tuning every detail. I'd brought her copies of the text I found in his vault app, the betting slips, the brake tampering report, the forged signature, and the audio of his thinly veiled concerns about my health and his wishes that I go recharge. We'd started referring to the whole operation as the performance, because that's what it had become, a carefully crafted illusion. My role was to keep him feeling safe and victorious. His role was to walk straight into a noose he didn't even realize existed. I made sure everything looked authentic. I booked a hotel in Flagstaff. I sent my sister a fake itinerary and warned her to act normal if Brad contacted her. I left the car in the driveway, letting him believe I'd be using it for the trip, even though it had already been inspected again, this time by a police-connected mechanic who documented every fresh adjustment Brad made the night before my supposed departure. He'd loosened something, just as before, only now we had time-stamped footage and fingerprints. I even left the garage light on for effect, as if I'd just come in from loading the trunk. But I didn't drive to Flagstaff. I drove to a friend's place across town, parked the car in their locked garage, and took an Uber to Vanessa's house. That night, while Brad was sleeping soundly in our bed, dreaming of debt-free days and life insurance checks, Vanessa and I were preparing the final piece of the puzzle. She had a contact, a local journalist who specialized in white-collar crime and insurance fraud. His name was Marcus, and within 30 minutes of reviewing the documents, he said, "If this plays out the way you think it will, I'll run it as a headline story, front page." That's when it became real. The fall wouldn't just be legal. It would be public, devastating, and permanent. The morning of my trip, I left a note on the counter, thanking Brad for his support and telling him I'd be back in a few days. I packed a suitcase with meaningless clothes and rolled it to the car, making sure my movements were caught by the Ring camera. He'd check the footage, no doubt, and he'd see what I wanted him to see. A woman tired, broken, and trusting enough to leave on her own. I drove the car out of the neighborhood, doubled back around the block, and slipped it into the mechanic's garage, where law enforcement would later inspect it. From there, I disappeared. Over the next 48 hours, Brad sent me 3 texts and 1 voicemail. "Hope the drive is going well. Call when you get there. Let me know you made it safely. Miss you already." The voicemail was almost poetic, concerned, tender, rehearsed. "I know it's just been a day, but I already miss your voice. Drive safe, okay? You mean everything to me." I saved the message to my evidence folder and emailed a copy to Vanessa. On day 3, I called him. My voice was calm, soft, deliberate. "Hey," I said, "just wanted to let you know I'll be heading back a little earlier than planned. Something feels off with the car, might stop at a mechanic along the way." There was a pause, long enough for me to imagine him sweating through his shirt. "Oh? What do you mean?" he asked, voice tight. "Just a weird noise when I hit the brakes," I said. "Nothing major, probably, but better safe than sorry." His response was predictable. "Don't worry about it, that car's solid. You're just still a little nervous from the last crash. It's all in your head." I could practically hear him calculating how much longer until I got back on the road. I ended the call quickly. "I'll keep you updated," I said. "Love you." He said it back. That night, Vanessa delivered the entire evidence package, printouts, photos, videos, and recordings, to her police contact. The officer didn't need convincing. "We'll move on this fast," he told her. "Once we verify what's under that hood, it'll be game over." But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to see it. I wanted to watch him learn that he'd lost, that the woman he tried to kill had outplayed him at every step. I arranged for the confrontation to happen somewhere public, not dramatic, just official. We picked the insurance office where he'd submitted the policy application. I called him the next morning and said they'd asked to verify some of my information in person. "Want to come with me?" I asked, like nothing had happened. He hesitated, then agreed. "Sure, I'll take the afternoon off." When we arrived, I could feel the tension in his body. He scanned the office like a man stepping into a trap but still trying to look casual. I smiled and held his hand. A staffer came out to greet us, then led us into a small conference room. The moment we sat down, the door opened again. This time, 2 police detectives stepped inside, along with a uniformed officer and Marcus, the reporter, with his press badge clearly visible. Brad's smile vanished. He looked at me. I didn't look away. One of the detectives opened a folder and began listing the charges: insurance fraud, forgery, attempted vehicular homicide. Brad stood up, hands shaking, but it was too late. The officer moved behind him. The cuffs clicked into place. He turned to me as I read him his rights. "You set me up," he said, stunned. I finally spoke, voice calm and even. "No, you set yourself up. I just made sure the ending was documented." As they led him out of the room, Marcus leaned over and whispered, "This is going to make one hell of a story." I nodded. "It already is." That night, I went home, alone. I stood in the driveway, staring at the empty garage. The house felt cleaner, quieter, safer. I didn't cry. I didn't pour a drink. I sat down and wrote out every final detail for the story Marcus would run in 2 days. He promised it would be fair, thorough, devastating. The title would be bold: "Wife Outsmarts Husband's Murder Plot in $200,000, 0 cents insurance scam." It wasn't revenge, not entirely. It was justice, cold, calculated, and very, very final. After Brad was arrested, the quiet felt unnatural. For the first few nights, I kept expecting the door to open, for him to return like he had from every business trip or late poker game, keys jingling, excuses ready. My body was so used to bracing itself that even in his absence, I flinched at shadows. But the stillness eventually shifted. It stopped feeling eerie and started to feel like peace. like freedom. Still, the story wasn't over, not for me, not for him, not yet. He was in a holding pattern, awaiting formal charges and indictment. His lawyer was already calling, trying to negotiate statements and imply misunderstandings. But there was no misunderstanding. Brad had tried to kill me more than once, and he did it with the kind of precision that only comes from practice, patience, and confidence that the person you're targeting will never see it coming. Except I had. I'd seen everything, and I'd made sure to leave a trail he couldn't bury. While the police finalized their case, Marcus published the article. He sent me a draft the day before it went live. It was brutal, clinical, accurate. He quoted sources from the insurance company, the mechanic, Vanessa, even the forensic specialist who had evaluated the brakes. There were no dramatic adjectives, no embellished statements, just facts. Facts with weight. The title? Her husband took out a $200,000 0-cents policy. Then the brakes failed. It hit the front page the following morning. Within hours, local news picked it up. By noon, it was national. By evening, talk shows were discussing it, not because the story was rare, but because it was too familiar. A woman in danger, almost killed by the man she trusted most. But this time, she didn't die. She fought back. I became a symbol without meaning to. Messages poured in, emails, DMs, handwritten letters, some from other women, some from men, apologizing for not believing their wives or sisters or daughters sooner. I didn't respond to most of them. Not because I didn't care, but because I was still navigating the shock that the worst parts of my life were now public record. Brad's lawyer sent a request for a private meeting. I declined. Then he sent a formal letter asking for a statement clarifying that I had never explicitly accused Brad of attempted murder. Vanessa laughed. They're panicking. He's cornered. Let them squirm. But I didn't want just to watch them squirm. I wanted to make sure that every loophole was closed, every crack in the system sealed. I reached out to the insurance fraud division myself. I filed a civil claim alongside the criminal charges. I contacted the licensing board of the insurance agent who'd processed the policy without verifying my identity. I filed a complaint. Then I contacted the loan company where Brad had tried to use my inherited property as collateral. I submitted documentation of fraud, demanded an investigation. Piece by piece, I dismantled every avenue Brad had ever used to manipulate the system. If he ever got out, he'd come back to ash. 2 weeks after his arrest, his sister called me. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly a year, not since a family dinner where Brad made a cruel joke at my expense and she'd laughed. Now her voice was cautious. I saw the news and I wanted to say, I didn't know, I really didn't. I told her thank you and that I hoped she never had to. She started crying, told me Brad used to manipulate their parents too, that he always seemed to charm his way out of consequences, that she never thought it would go that far. I said nothing, there was nothing else to say. She had moved through the world blind to the man her brother really was, and now, like the rest of them, she had to reconcile that image with the truth. At the preliminary hearing, I sat 2 rows behind him in the courtroom. He looked thinner, more pale. His hair wasn't combed the way he liked it. The tailored suit was gone. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt and khakis that sagged at the waist. He didn't look at me, not once. When the charges were read, insurance fraud, forgery, attempted vehicular homicide, and premeditated assault, he barely blinked. His lawyer spoke for him, requested leniency, cited emotional distress, gambling addiction, and marital strain as factors. I didn't react, I just watched. I let the judge and the evidence do the talking. When court adjourned, Brad was escorted out in cuffs. I stood as he passed. Our eyes met for a second, and in that second, I didn't feel fear or sadness or even anger. I felt closure. After the hearing, Marcus asked if I wanted to do a live interview, a sit-down, something more personal. I agreed. Not for brag, but for the women who had written me, whose stories mirrored mine, who hadn't gotten out in time. The interview aired a week later. We filmed it in a quiet studio, no audience, just me and the camera. I told everything. I told them about the night I woke up in the hospital and saw his smile. I told them about the fake signatures, the vitamins, the second brake tampering. I told them about how I smiled back at him even after I knew, because survival sometimes means pretending just long enough to outlive the danger. I said, he thought I was weak because I loved him, but love isn't weakness, and neither is survival. The clip went viral. Meanwhile, the court proceedings moved forward. Brad was denied bail. He was considered a flight risk and a danger to his spouse. Vanessa told me the prosecution was building an airtight case. They don't just want a conviction, she said. They want to make an example of him. I agreed. Not out of revenge, but because it was the only way to make sure no one else would be fooled by a man like Brad in a suit and a smile. Still, there were nights I couldn't sleep. Nights when I walked through the house and touched the edges of the life I'd almost lost. The couch we used to curl up on, the stove where he made his famous pasta, the hallway where we used to hang photos of vacations, photos I'd already taken down. The weight of it came in waves. Mourning something that wasn't real is one of the strangest kinds of grief, but I let myself feel it. Because the pain meant I was still here. Still alive. I sold the car. I didn't want to see it again. I donated most of Brad's things and hired a company to deep clean the house. Then I took a small trip, this time a real one. I drove out to California, visited the beach where my parents used to take me as a child. I stood barefoot in the sand and watched the tide roll in. It was quiet, and no one knew my name. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt small in the right way, not invisible, just free. I didn't rebuild everything right away. Some pieces take time, but I was no longer surviving. I was rebuilding on my terms. And if anyone ever tried to calculate my worth again, they wouldn't find a dollar sign. They'd find a record of a woman who was underestimated, hunted, and still walked out alive, with every receipt in hand. And they'd know not to try, because I didn't just escape. I won. The day of Brad's sentencing, the courthouse was quiet. Not the way you'd imagine it. No media circus, no angry crowds or flashing cameras, just a low hum of footsteps, papers shuffling, security belts clinking. I sat alone on the hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, the same bench where months earlier I'd stared at the floor, trying to breathe. This time, I sat upright, steady. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't here to beg for justice. I already had that. Today was for closure. The prosecutor had told me the sentence was locked in, a plea deal that Brad's attorney had pushed for once the evidence overwhelmed them. He would serve 12 years without parole, followed by 5 years of supervised release. The forgery, insurance fraud, and attempted murder charges weren't just convictions. They were a statement, a message that he wouldn't walk away from what he did with a shrug and a second chance. He'd taken his shot. He'd lost. When they brought him into the room, he looked different. The arrogance had drained out of him. He looked smaller. Gray had crept into his hair, and the lines around his mouth had deepened. He didn't look at me, not once. The judge asked if I wanted to speak. I hadn't planned to, but something in me shifted as I stood. I walked to the front of the courtroom, turned toward the bench, then toward the man I used to call my husband. When I married Brad, I believed I was safe, I said, voice calm, even. I believed he loved me, that we were building something together, a life, a future, but Brad had a different plan. He saw me not as a partner, but as a solution to his problems, a number on a page. He took out a policy on my life, tampered with my car, and waited for a payout. And when that didn't work, he tried again. Every day I think about how close he came to succeeding. Every day I remember what it felt like to wake up in that hospital and see him smiling beside me, knowing now what he'd done. And every day since, I've chosen not to let that break me. I am here, I'm alive, and I am no one's payout, not anymore. I didn't say more. I didn't need to. I returned to my seat, and Brad still didn't look at me. The judge gave a formal summary, then handed down the sentence. The gavel struck, and just like that, it was done. Brad was led away, and I didn't watch him go. I walked out of the courtroom and into the sunlight, and for the first time in months, I let the warmth touch my face without the weight of fear on my shoulder. A month later, I moved. I sold the house and started fresh in a different city. I found a place near the coast, with big windows and clean air. I took a job consulting part-time, nothing intense, just enough to stay active while I figured out what I really wanted next. I took long walks in the morning. I drank coffee on the porch. I wrote, sometimes about what happened, sometimes just about anything else. I reclaimed the quiet, not the silence of tension, but the kind that feels like healing. People still reach out sometimes, women, journalists, strangers who see me as some kind of symbol. I understand why, but I don't think of myself as a survivor anymore. I don't want what Brad did to define the rest of my life. What he did was monstrous, but what I did in response, that's what I carry with me. I took back my power. I built my exit with precision. I didn't scream, I didn't run. I dismantled him piece by piece with the same calm calculation he used to try and erase me. That's what justice looked like for me. Cold, quiet, complete. Sometimes I still think about the night I found the policy, how surreal it felt to see my name next to a dollar amount. $200,000, 0 cents. That's what I was worth to him. That's what he thought I was, a ticket out of debt, a solution to a problem. But I know the truth now. I was never worth $200, 0 cents. I was worth everything he could never have: integrity, strength, survival. And in the end, he wasn't the one who collected. I was. Not in money, not in revenge, but in freedom, in truth, in knowing that when someone tries to write your ending, you can take the pen back and write a better one. And I did.